I am Kelsey Libert. I'm one of the co-founders of Fractl and Lead Time. Fractl is a content marketing agency, and Lead Time is a AI-powered PR workflow that we're getting ready to launch in Q3. So what I'm here today is to talk about 3 key topics for helping brands earn really high authority, mainstream news, niche industry publisher coverage, both in providing value to brand engagement and SEO metrics and all the great things. So I'm going to dive into a lot of slides. I think over 60, 70 slides to get through today. So I'm going to jump right in and kind of give you a little bit more about who I am and kind of what makes me an authority on this topic. So my industry experience, I've been a co-founder of Fractl for 12 years now. We have been a leader in the agency since kind of the inception of content marketing started about 12, 15 years ago. I have personally executed a lot of research into understanding what it takes to produce content that high authority journalists want to cover, and how to produce content that kind of taps into massive syndication networks. So when you get coverage on, let's say, CNN or Huffington Post, you kind of can ensure that that's going to get spread to hundreds of other relevant publishers with custom stories, syndicated stories, and whatnot. So you can find a lot of my research in major industry publishers like Harvard Business Review, Entrepreneur Inc., Time, as well as industry publishers like Moz and HubSpot and whatnot. I've also spoken at several industry conferences, including MozCon, PubCon, and with other brands like BuzzSumo, Native Advertising Days, and BuzzStream. My company also has a lot of really great accolades, both through the Inc. 5000, fastest growing companies in our early days, and we're also recognized as one of the Clutch Leader Matrix agencies. So really, what we specialize in is producing campaigns that publishers really love to feature. You can see here, these are just a handful of quotes that we've received recently from journalists when we pitch our campaigns to them, really focusing on the fact that the research that we provide aims to be really interesting, fascinating. A lot of them are saying, so interesting. These are really a lot of the common phrases we hear for our research. So what I want to do today is kind of distill to you, how do you produce kind of really interesting research that journalists want to cover? We've done it for all sorts of brands. So, very dry verticals like maybe finance or law, more serious topics that have a lot of regulation. We've also done it for more, fun, fluffy brands like travel and whatnot. So you're able to do this across a wide number of verticals, pretty much any vertical, let's say, except maybe some of the more shadier ones. So again, this is praise from the actual PR pitches that Fractl's team has sent, where oftentimes journalists are actually coming to us and saying, hey, can you add me to your media list? Like, I want to see a lot more of these pitches whenever you have them, whenever you have anything that's relevant to my beat, please add me to your list, right? So there's no better compliment you can get than a journalist saying, hey, pitch me more. So really, the biggest accolade we have, right, is that Clutch is one of the main kind of agency ranking platforms that has over 27,000 companies listed for content marketing services. And Fractl has been in their top 5 of their leader matrix for as long as this platform has existed. It's grown exponentially, honestly, in the last year or two. I feel like they're adding 1,000 agencies a month these days. But now we continue to maintain our position in the top 3. So we really do have a lot of client reviews, case studies, and just an industry reputation that they score by that kind of demonstrate that we as an agency and the company that we've all built together understand what it takes to kind of break into mainstream news and get coverage for your brand. And that's what I'm going to go into a lot of today. We've done it for Fortune 500 companies, which I'll admit are a bit easier, I think, to get press from. But I would say probably 70% of our client roster is actually SMBs and startups who need to work a little harder, right, to build that brand authority, get the recognition, and then make it easier for them to get future coverage. So my GIFs don't work. This is an uploaded PDF, but you get the gist, right? Do high authority links still matter? I think everybody in the industry for the last, 4 to 8 weeks after the Google leak, and really for the last 12 years, has always been in this question of how important are links? I think there's enough resources out there nowadays to really show, even within the last month, right? Links are very important to SEO, but also just to general PR KPIs like engagement, awareness, sales KPIs like conversions. So all of these quotes here are based on really authoritative sources in the SEO industry talking about studies that have been done to analyze whether or not links are valuable. And really the key point here is that authoritative links matter now more than ever before, right? Recent study as of June 2024, right, just a couple weeks ago, over 96% of websites ranking in the top 10 had more than 1,000 ULDs, unique linking domains. Only 3% or 0.3%, even more important, had less than 100 backlinks. Okay, so those are links from any outside website that are linking back to you as an authority on your topic. And basically, the more of these links and mentions you have, the more authority your brand gets in the eyes of search algorithms and where they rank you. Beyond the SEO metrics, though, there are lots of valuable ways that engaging content can provide a bottom line impact for your brand, right? So we'll go into that. So our position, right, as Fractl and Lead Time, of course, is in the dawn of AI-driven content, high authority links will be a major differentiating factor from sites that are spun up overnight. So it's very clear AI is going to be leveraged over the next several years, forever, right, at this point, and increasingly so, to produce content. There will be some people that will just spin up 1,000-page websites overnight, and they will certainly be nailed by Google for thin content pages and whatnot. I've already seen it in audits I've done for some clients, but there will also be other brands who are leveraging, agents, multi-prompt agents, and other really innovative technology that is going to go beyond, far beyond what a freelance writer can produce on their own on, thousands of different topics. It'll be very important to still weave in, your client or your expertise, but there's not a shadow of a doubt that right now already there are thousands of domains being spun up, and some will be ones that you need to compete with. And the best ones will be outshining others because they have that authoritative backlink portfolio that kind of demonstrates that this site has been here for a while. This is a trusted source. They've got a lot of really high authority other sites linking back to them. Google will rank you better, higher engagement and whatnot. So let's get into the meat of the study, right? Let's talk about how to put your brand at the front of breaking and cyclical news. So before you go into, using AI to pitch your brand, what you need to do is really learn and understand how to produce newsworthy content. And the best way to do that is by producing studies or expert quotes and all these different strategies we'll go into on topics that are considered newsworthy, either through breaking news that's happening that your brand can add value to, or cyclical news that's happening, holidays, back to school, whatnot. Or second to that is just kind of evergreen news, right? There are certain FAQs that come up in every industry, and what guides can you create on that? So how do you earn media, right? You create news. These are two examples of placements we've had recently with the New York Times. You can do seasonal content, right? Like living with the ghost around Halloween. That's a great angle that we do really well with every year. You can do more evergreen content, like which states are the most safe and secure for renters. And each of these studies have broad consumer appeal. Journalists have a lot of interest in covering new data on these topics, and they either are relevant in a breaking news cycle with, the holidays coming up or whatnot, or they're relevant to an evergreen news cycle with renters are always moving to new neighborhoods, and how do you know where is safe? So let's get into the meat of it. Data journalism campaigns are one set of campaign that you can use to earn press. I know marketers and SEOs especially love to rebrand the same thing over and over and over again. I'm guilty of it myself. I think we've called PR media relations, digital PR, blogger outreach, right? Like the industry evolves, but it's all the same thing. So you might know this is something else. At Fractl, we call it data journalism campaigns. These are larger scope data-driven stories that build a brand's awareness, engagement, and authority. So what we generally do is we aim to do a proprietary research study that can be distilled down into kind of really interesting short graphics that really the goal is to highlight the most surprising, emotionally compelling findings from the research that we do. So whatever your topic is, really sinking your teeth into what data did I get from this that's really surprising me, that stands out, that elicits, the emotion of surprise or interest. Fractal's done a lot of research on this topic in our early days on Harvard Business Review. You can find a lot of it, really trying to understand which emotions kind of lead to viral sharing. And if all you take away from this is focus on surprise, that can be the biggest thing to help you stand out, especially in a sea of content marketers who are all trying to do the same studies nowadays, right? So what you do is you produce the study, right? You analyze the data, you come up with a few custom graphics, simple pie charts work oftentimes. I'd say 95% of the times, the journalists don't actually cover the asset, the visual asset, but it serves to add value on your landing page, your client's landing page, just visually intriguing, right? And so what you want to do is you have the assets, you weave it into a newsworthy kind of landing page with actionable insights, which is super important because every publisher is going to say, great, this is like surprising data, but what do I do with it, right? So you need to have, that's where you have your expertise woven in through your quotes to complement the research, featuring your brand more, right? A lot of opportunities. Then you take that landing page and you pitch it to authoritative publishers. So when I say authoritative publishers, I'm thinking usually generally domain rating or domain authority scores for how trusted a site is. And generally what you'll find is the mainstream news sites in your country, in the US, right? It's USA Today, CNBC, CNN, but also there's niche publishers that are still authorities, in my opinion. Like Business Insider has more of that kind of business finance angle, or you can have Everyday Health, more like health publishers. So those are what I consider kind of an industry leading type of publisher outside of mainstream news. So these are all the different types of sites that you can earn links from, right? It goes beyond mainstream local news, international news, radio stations, .edu, blogs, .govs, podcasts, more. So we'll go into how to earn each one of those types of press from here. But the biggest thing is when you use data, proprietary research to produce publishers, that's what they're looking for to consider your brand newsworthy and worth covering. Not necessarily a press release all the time, right? Like that's a strategy that's been tried and true. A lot of people do it. It works for big brands. It works for smaller brands sometimes. But really, when you want to break into the news and say you're a startup, you don't have a lot of kind of that equity, doing research within your vertical that is either kind of maybe a little tangential or within your broader themes of your vertical is the most effective way to get brand coverage. So what's an example of this? One of the campaigns we've done recently is an analysis of retirees rejoining the workforce. So kind of like baby boomers and other older demographics that are being forced back into the workforce because of the fact that inflation is so high, the cost of living is so expensive. And so, unfortunately, 1 out of 6 retirees, according to our study, are considering rejoining the workforce, which is like a huge alarming stat for a lot of people and a lot of journalists, right? Finance journalists, journalists that cover like AARP, like older demographic baby boomer news and whatnot. And so what we did is we did this whole study of the baby boomer generation and HR people that employ them to really try to understand what are the patterns that they're seeing, why is this happening, what can we do about it? And this study earned coverage in AARP, Inc., Entrepreneur, Daily Mail, CBS, Go Banking Reach. Hundreds of different publishers covered it, both in US news, UK mainstream news, and then niche sites related to HR and related to boomers themselves. So great example of how you can take a set. So this is for paychecks. And so this is how you can take a study and then make it broadly relatable to a lot of different publishers, but still relevant to your brand. So as you can see here too, proprietary research does a little bit of assurances, right, for ensuring that your brand gets the proper citations during AI overviews, right? Because when you are producing something that is custom proprietary research, Google is almost forced into making sure that they're crediting your brand for that research because it doesn't exist really anywhere else. So it's a great way to kind of stay ahead of some of the innovation that is coming to search. Another campaign example is Best Cities to Thrift. So we work with Coupon Follow on this campaign. This was a Yelp data analysis combined with a smaller survey to understand where are people finding the most stores to do thrifting in? What are the highest rated cities for thrifting? What exactly are people thrifting and what are they saving the most money on? Are there certain categories that we should all be thrifting more of? Apparently home goods, which I hadn't ever thought of. I always thought of thrifting as like clothing. So the big stat here was clothing thrifters save almost $1,800 a year by buying secondhand. So that was a headline that was covered by dozens of different publishers, all who wrote unique stories, but made sure to kind of feature that stat as like a main theme in their study. So again, people were clearly surprised that, hey, $1,800, that's a pretty good amount of money to save. That's a vacation for a lot of people. So great relevant content, CNET, The Street, Real Simple, Penny Hoarder, Board Panda, right, for a couponing site, lots of finance content, lots of home and lifestyle brand coverage. This is all really great. So when you produce evergreen research that's relevant to your vertical without being so hyper on brand that it's an ad, what you do is you create an evergreen link magnet. So we will typically perform outreach generally for somewhere between 1 to 4 weeks, depending on the news cycle, sometimes even shorter with newsjacking. But really what happens is once you seed that page with a few authoritative links, it generally will appear in searches when other people are going to find data that's relevant to that type of angle. And then suddenly you're now getting coverage for your brand on leading publishers without ever having to write an email pitch, right? So this was published originally back in 2022. It has since gotten coverage in February of 2024, March of 2024, November of 2022, and down here, June, my slide button covers it, of 2023. So you can see here, right, you do your initial pitch, and then you continue to reap the benefits for years to come, really. So what are the different ways that you can produce studies, right? I think the industry at large really relies heavily on surveys, and they're certainly one of the most valuable ways to quickly produce proprietary research at a relatively low cost. But because there's so much saturation, I think, happening in the content marketing industry right now, it's important that brands really reflect on how they can produce a more unique methodology than what everyone else is doing. Because if everybody's pitching the same headlines, especially around the holidays, right? How do you stand out if you're all sending the same type of content? So the opportunity you have is looking at how can I produce something a little different than what everyone else is doing. So we use dozens of different types of methodologies in the campaigns that we produce. Generally, we aim to produce a few varieties of these methodologies over the course of 6 to 12 months. We'll hit most of them. So generally, primary research, right? API data analysis is a huge one. Anytime you can tap into API. AI is really great if you don't even have any programming skills to be able to work with APIs, teach you how to work with different APIs, help you do the data analysis for it. It's really incredible what you're capable of doing now with tools like Claude and GPT. So large-scale surveys are kind of tried and true, right? 20 questions, get really in-depth, go into demographic information, go into information about gender and age and income and whatnot. Lots of ways to splice that data up. Pulse surveys, so that's more about trending news, breaking news that's happening when you want to do a really quick survey to understand, what is being said that in this breaking news cycle and how can I add value to it. Google Trends analyses, Google Trends by states. Most of these are low to no cost to do too. So it's important for startups to look at what from this list can I do easily on my own versus what might be more expensive. So APIs can be a little bit more expensive to access sometimes, but it's very easy and low cost to do a 5-question survey. You just have to be going after the right news cycles. So talk about going after the right news cycles, right? So reactive PR to me is one of the best opportunities for a brand. So if you look at data journalism, it's more kind of the evergreen news that's happening in your industry and how you can provide value with larger scope data analysis. Reactive PR is based on breaking news in your vertical. Usually there are potentially divergent views that are gaining traction. So there's some sort of discord that's happening in your industry and people aren't quite sure which side they're going to take. And so that generally drums up a lot of coverage, right? The important thing here is that you have to move very rapidly to produce that data to add value to that news cycle, right? Because it happens so fast. If you're not one of the first movers in it, you're at a point where everyone else has already added value and now it's kind of old news. It can happen sometimes within 24 to 72 hours, sometimes 1 to 2 weeks, but usually with breaking news, you've got to move within that first 24 to 72 hours of the news breaking to do your data analysis and be pitching it to publishers to kind of leverage that initial curve that happens when they're actively looking for research. is generally within 24 hours, we'll turn around a study. And then our PR team will do more scaled outreach to go after all the publishers that are kind of starting to cover this topic and the ones that are relevant to this topic and we think are going to cover it next that might not know. With the capabilities of AI now, campaigns that used to take Fractl 4 to 6 weeks to produce now are literally taking hours. We did a Yelp data analysis just the other week, and one of our data journalists was like, wow, that took me an hour. And, the great news here is that means your cost to produce these things go down, your ability to scale the number of executions you do goes way up. And really you have to think about, okay, not every single attempt is going to be a home run, but if I'm consistently doing attempts or monitoring the news when there are opportunities, the likelihood of having a home run within, a 1 to 3 or 1 to 6 month timeline is pretty high, as long as you're following a lot of the tips you're going to get today. So one of the things we do is, I would say probably 90 to 95% of the studies that we do at Fractl are hosted on our clients' landing pages. And the reason for this is, in our earlier stages of doing this outreach, I personally found that when I was pitching, the publishers were less likely to link to our client because they thought like, oh, well, I just name dropped them. Like, why do I have to link back to the client? What value does that really add to my study? I already gave you credit. And so what we found was, when you host your research on a landing page, just like a blog page or a pillar page on your site, you almost force the issue of, you need to source this study in order to cover it on your column. Proper attribution is a real big thing for journalists. They care a lot about that. And so now you've given them a really strong reason. You're providing more value in your study. You want to be credited as the source of it. And so typically what we'll see now is they'll link both to the homepage and to the study landing page. Sometimes just the study landing page, but typically maybe 50% of the stories have both. So it really drives a lot of value to have that landing page. We'll also generally password protect landing pages. We typically won't for reactive type work because the news cycle is moving so fast. We just want to mass blast it out. But for data journalism campaigns and the other type of campaigns I'm going to describe, it always helps to password protect those pages because essentially you're guaranteeing that exclusivity that the highest authority publishers care a lot about, right? They don't want something that's stale. So you're guaranteeing that, hey, you're the first to break this news. Like, that you're pretty lucky to have this story, that you're going to bring this research out that's relevant to your readership, on behalf of a trusted brand. So password protection is great when you're not working with something super time sensitive. When you are, drop it, scale. So for the PR team on Reactive PR, generally what we're trying to do is come up with at least 3 to 5 different templates that kind of hook into the different breaking news themes that are happening. Typically what you'll see is that each news story might have like 1 to 3 or more verticals that are going to cover it, right? Sometimes in health vertical, you'll see men's interest sites, women's interest sites, general health sites, psychology type sites. There's a lot of verticals that generally are relevant to one study, right? Because there's different questions and themes you've explored in your research. So making sure that your PR team is hyper targeted in their outreach by having templates that really speak to those different journalist segments can help you develop what I've always called a seemingly personalized pitch, right? We now call them like a reactive pitch, where you're kind of rating a template based on a trending news story that's being covered by anywhere from, like, let's say 10 to 20, 5 to 10 publishers, but having that hyper-targeted pitch is incredibly important because so many publishers get, somewhere between 100 to 300 pitches per day, right? So the more relevant you can be to their specific beat, the more you stand out, the more you're going to increase your coverage. So what we'll do is we'll generally aim to have a list of about 100 different journalists by the time we're ready to go live with our research. And that'll be segmented into lists of, anywhere from 3 to 5 or more. And then we'll blast those out within 24 to 72 hours of that news breaking, finishing our research. We'll see how the subject lines are doing. We'll A/B test different angles, and then we'll continue to pitch generally for a minimum of three to 5 business days. Because typically that's when you'll see kind of the drop off of certain news happen, but maximum 1 week, right? So constantly kind of editing those templates, seeing what's working, doubling down, going after new publishers that are starting to cover it. This is a really great way to scale your outreach with relatively minimal effort, right? Because most of these campaign methodologies take about an hour, maybe 24 hours max to produce. And the 24 hours technically at least with surveys, is usually you're waiting for the responses to come in. So it's not like you're doing a lot of work. Let me check on the comments here. Okay. Okay, so as far as is it common for campaigns to hit or miss? Generally what we say is that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your campaigns, right? Because when you have a home run campaign, you're getting somewhere in the mix of, hundreds of pickups for that angle. And that means that you really hit that sweet spot for the news cycle, right? You've got it right at that curve. And so it scaled your outreach because you provided value in the news cycle right as it was bursting. That can happen maybe 20, 30% or more of the time, depending on your limitations, like your brand, how much reach you have overall, like how many publishers you're really relevant to in the research that you're doing, how comfortable your different units within your company are with, going tangential or maybe going controversial, right? All these things can influence how successful you are. So that's like a general 80-20 rule, especially for, I'd say, more conservative brands or more niche brands. We've definitely seen a lot of clients that will pop off with, if we do 12 campaigns in a year, I'd say 30% of them maybe break over 100. There might be 40 to 50% that are in like the 20 to 50 plus range. And then, 10 to 20, 30% that are in that 10 to 30 range or so. So it gives you a good spread. So what we always try to do really is focus in on, it's not a volume game, right? It's an authority game. And we want to be focused on driving the most unique linking domains back to your site. So even if you had every single campaign and it got 200 pickups, but it was all the same sites, that doesn't provide as much value as 200 pickups on 200 different sites. So, really focusing on how do you go after different verticals with each study you do so that you expand the number of unique linking domains back to your site. How do you pursue topics that are relevant to maybe .gov or .edu sites? And how is that different from mainstream news? So we'll go into some of that now. I have to be cognizant of time. Okay, so one of the reactive studies we've done, really monitoring breaking news, especially political news, and this year more than ever in the United States and honestly around the world, I've seen a lot of controversial political news happening right now this year. And this is one of the best opportunities you have for reactive PR if your brand, is comfortable commenting on these things and monitoring that news. So great example in 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned in the States. We did a very simple analysis at the time. We were working with Inner Body Health, a health research company. And what we did is as soon as that news broke, within 24 hours, we went to Google Trends and we looked at, what are relevant keywords to this news, right? Vasectomies. What we found was the interest in searches for vasectomies rose 250% in the day following the news breaking, right? So that's a pretty significant growth within 24 hours of this news breaking, definitely connected. And so what we did is we took that single stat from Google Trends, free tool, and we paired it with our client who's an expert in health research. And we kind of came up with commentary around, okay, why is that search happening? Why is that search interest growing? What are the concerns or benefits of vasectomies? And what is his broader take on the news cycle? This blew up, really simple execution, got coverage on MSNBC, Katie Couric, Today, Washington Examiner, Politico, hundreds of sites covered this, right? This is one of those you hit the holy grail type opportunities because you moved quick with news that the entire country and world is commenting on. Another one, so the following year, we've done hundreds of these per year. I'm kind of showing you different verticals and different ways to approach it. So the first one was just a Google Trends analysis. This one, ChatGPT, right? The topic of the conversation. AI in public schools, right? Or in colleges, right? In December of 2022, GPT became public for the average user to use. By January 2023, right? The very next month, New York City public schools banned access to GPT for students and teachers. So that was huge because New York City is a leader in this space and public education here, and a lot of states would likely follow suit. So what we did is we immediately put together a study for our client, study.com. And what we did is we wanted to understand, okay, like how many teachers or professors support this decision to ban access to this innovative technology that is about to rule our world in the next 5 years, especially for students and also for teachers. Why prevent them from having that efficiency gain? How do teachers feel about it? Were they getting any information on the policies or whatnot? Had they found people cheating using it? Yes, they had at that time. And, how should it be managed? And there was a clear divide here. I think it was like 50-60% of teachers said it should be banned, and the other 40-50% said it shouldn't be banned. We need to be learning how to use this, and we need to teach the kids how to use it. So there's great opportunity to earn press, right? At the time, it was just New York City public schools. About a month later, we rebooted the study and had a map showing kind of the growth of other states had followed suit, kind of starting to cover the country. And both of these studies, the first one and the second, earned over 300 pickups in mainstream news. So you really see the potential for when you're following breaking news within your industry. And there aren't tons of opportunities for this, right? But this should be a mix that you're focusing on in the course of your year and having tools monitoring it. You can get really great press. So I will go into the tools that we use to monitor news. So I saw that question. Okay, so another one, beyond studies, right? Because studies can seem intimidating to a lot of people. Some of them require budgets, but really, typically the budgets aren't more than a couple $100 unless you're getting into really sophisticated stuff. So a lot of people are capable of doing this type of work. A lot of these can even be free for you besides the time of you as a startup or your team monitoring this news. So this example is more in what expert quotes, right? How can I use just my own expertise and provide that value in a breaking news cycle to earn coverage? So again, right, politics are a great source for this type of need for thought leadership and expertise. So one of our clients, College Rover, is really passionate about going after controversial news, which is a godsend for this type of work. And so what we do is we set up a lot of alerts for monitoring, politics and education and changes that are especially happening at the collegiate level. And immediately when we see those opportunities, whether it's on Twitter or X, or, Quoted or, Harrow, any of the platforms where journalists are actively seeking news, we always are looking to pitch our client on the quotes about whatever the controversial coverage is. So through this client has earned just this year, right, USA Today, Quartz, NBC News, and dozens of other leading publishers for his stance on whatever the policies are that are changing at individual colleges or on a national level. So that's reactive, right? That is a little harder to monitor, right? If you have to really be lasered in on the news. Sometimes news can break at times that aren't ideal for your team to really be doing anything. You can miss that window of opportunity. But as long as you have it in the back of your mind, you have systems set up to monitor it, that is a really great opportunity to scale outreach because there's a natural scale in the publishers covering the news. Proactive PR is a little bit more niche in its coverage because it's talking about something that's probably more closely to the brand. It's based on cyclical news cycles instead of breaking news cycles that maybe don't have as much traction unless it's the holidays. And really, this type of strategy comes down to your team sitting down and looking at, the next 3 months, let's say. I generally like to do this planning quarterly. What's coming up in the news cycle? There's so many holidays nowadays, like Donut Day and Bee Day and like Wine Day. So every month, almost every day has like some sort of holiday that some publisher is covering. So really look, setting up tools to monitor what are the upcoming events in the next month or two that my brand can speak to and provide value in. Typically, what we try to do is either design resources ahead of the news cycle that we can pitch. And these can be simple like blog pillar pages. They don't have to have intensive research. They can just be really in-depth guides using your expertise. Generally, they're on more mid-bottom funnel topics, which can be great, right? Because reactive can be a little bit more tangential. This can be a little bit more on-brand, highly relevant links. And this is more outreach that's done at a slower pace, right? We're not moving in 24, 72 hours. We generally will take 3 to 4 weeks leading up to that holiday to pitch it. It's really important that you're doing it preceding that holiday in enough time because journalists are covering it, that month leading up to it. If you wait to pitch that week, I've seen so many times where journalists are like, oh, we already did that coverage, right? So you really want to be pitching kind of like a month before so they can kind of have you in their queue of content to cover. It's the biggest thing with proactive. So Examples of this, right? Teachers on back to school spending. So in August, early August, we're doing an analysis of a survey first of a small number of a niche group of people, teachers, roughly 350, right? Then we also looked at nearly 30 Amazon wish lists, and we combined that with BLS, so Bureau of Labor Statistics, year-over-year inflation calculator. So using kind of combined methodologies, we were able to come up with analysis of like how much teachers are spending out of pocket for their classrooms, and how do people feel about that? How do teachers feel about it? Do parents think that's fair? And very simple, right? 500 words, roughly 10 bulleted key takeaways from that research, only 2 visual assets. So it doesn't need to be some massive guide to do this. It's really succinct and focused. Earned 142 pickups for this client. Another example of this, again, just a simple Google Trends quote combined with a resource on the popular travel destinations. We linked spontaneous travel as a keyword was up 400%, combined with where people are traveling popular destinations, and that got 110 pickups. And this was just an existing resource that was already on the client site. So, quotes, guides, predictions, listicles, little mini pulse surveys, public data sets. There's a lot of ways you can go after kind of more proactive news planning. To me, expert quotes are really the umbrella of proactive, because it's, you're planning ahead with something really simple that you can do. How can my brand, the owners of this brand, the leaders within this agency or this company provide thought leadership? There's so many, benefits to that too, besides the SEO and PR KPIs. And so these are a few examples of our client Payless Power. We're in our 3rd year of an annual engagement with them. They say that we're the Michael Jordan of link building. Love those guys. One of the things we do for them in their mix of PR strategies is simple quotes, right? We do a lot of data journalism, lots of tools, but simple quotes are super relevant. They get them lots of coverage in Texas-based publishers where their clients exist, and authoritative publishers where they just want to build their thought leadership. So seasonally, we did content around how holiday lights could increase your electricity bill and ways you could counteract that. We did research on, in the summer months, how to keep your electric bill low. Is it worth it to use fans or an air conditioner, which is really better for the cost of electricity and overall efficiency of your home? We also are doing analyses on how much energy does Bitcoin or mining use versus other, financial institutions or whatnot. And I think everyone assumes that mining uses a massive amount of energy, which certainly does. AI is going to use way more. And how can they add value on all these things that are relevant to electricity for their brand, right? These are great opportunities. You're not going to generally see hundreds of links on these because they're just quotes, but you might get a really great link like Go Banking Rates, USA Today, and Crypto News. These are all DA 80 plus publishers. So just if you are an agency working with a lot of clients, one of the best ways to find existing site resources, right, is just do a quick site search for whatever keyword you're trying to build proactive news for. Because so many of the clients we work with, right, some of them might have thousands of pages on their site. So just doing those simple searches can really help you hone in on, okay, what already exists on this site that I can use, or what do I need to create content for because there's just a gap in this coverage. You might not always have an expert in-house for the topic that you're doing, especially if you're doing something that's a bit more tangential, but don't feel like that means that you need to stop there, right? You can find credible sources, especially my favorite thing to do is go look at like a nonprofit, go look at industry associations. So one of the clients we work with is in the surety bond space, and truckers really need surety bonds, right? And so we did a campaign on female truckers, relevant enough, tangential, but relevant enough. But when we went to pitch that campaign, a lot of the leading publishers were like, well, we want an expert to interview for this pitch, which is very, very common now. I would say 80% of the stories we earn now, journalists want that kind of firsthand expertise from your client or someone else. So you kind of have to think about that when you go to pitch anything. And so what I did in this instance, as we started getting more and more of these requests, is I reached out, I did a quick search in Google for, female truckers, just start really broad. And I found a female trucker association, right? Like there's so many of these types of opportunities in a number of industries. These people are eager for press as well. Simply sent them a quick email to their marketing team, said, hey, do you have anybody who would be willing to be quoted alongside my client research. They responded within minutes to me with interest and lots of different people they could connect me with. And within a couple of days, the story went live. And then the next week, they wanted more people. I think we got them covered in 3 or 4 different sites, along with our client getting coverage in hundreds of sites, right? So great mutual benefit here. You don't always have to be the expert. You do want to have the data. So breezing through this next section, so I have enough time for the AI portion. Really, you need to understand the content strategies to be able to scale the PR with AI. So this is the most important part. AI can automate it for you in seconds by the end of this. So interactive tools are a really great resource. There's a lot of programmers on different, GitHub or even like Fiverr or whatnot that can produce tools for you. And honestly, our business partners are producing them even just using Claude, prompting back and forth, being able to create, very simple calculators are easier now than ever before. So even a novice can be a person who can put together a tool with the right focus and series of prompts to get to the end result. So another one we did was loading your face as an alcoholic, 755 stories. So these tools are generally more mid-bottom funnel, and they're really evergreen link magnets if you design them right. So think about, what are the FAQs, what are the pain points in your industry, and how can you design a tool to help address that issue? And those are a goldmine. Resource link building campaigns. These to me are some of the highest value in the types of links that they can earn, like .gov and .edu links, but can also be some of the lowest kind of reach as the number of publishers that will want to cover them, because generally they come across as more on-brand resources and marketing content. And a lot of marketing publishers want you to pay for that feature, right? Unless you're really providing value and breaking research and whatnot. So these we do for, maybe in a 12-month engagement, we might do 1 or 2 of these, depending on the client vertical. The more authoritative the brand is, the easier it is to get coverage for these. Generally, it's a more long form guide, anywhere from like 2, sometimes even up to like 3,000 or 4,000 words. Usually if they have assets, sometimes it can be repurposed data visualizations from other like authoritative sources like government sites and .edus, which you can use to get those links. You do a really narrow PR strategy to those very specific sites that are relevant. The .gov and .edus. And typically you'll get, anywhere from 5, 10, 20 or more links, depending on how broad your topic is. So .gov sites are generally going after in-depth research on actionable guides for like broad consumer appeal or broad like target market appeal. So that paycheck study I shared earlier on, boomers or retirees rejoining the workforce, that was covered by a governor. We've done studies for Payless Power on electricity costs around the country versus Texas and power outages. That's gotten them coverage on .gov sites. And also studies we've done for finance clients, looking at even just the cost of Thanksgiving and the increasing cost of that year over year, and how some people can't afford to host Thanksgiving. That earns study coverage on a .gov site. So these are all themes that kind of electricity, Thanksgiving, work, massive amount of people in the workforce, really broad topics. So .edu blogs are a bit different, right? These are very focused to students. Typically they're run by students or professors, which can be a lot easier to break into, in my opinion, than like a mainstream news publisher that's getting 100 pitches a day. So you can, if you want to get around to your comment, the .gov restrictions on covering anything commercial. So really what you do is, by not focusing as much on like all of your conversion messages, right? Like leave that for other pages. The goal of these pages is to earn high authority links. The more you try to stuff in conversion messages into link building pages, the more you're going to deter a large number of journalists from covering the page. That's not really the intent of those pages. There's money page link building specifically designed to build links to those pages, but for the purpose of these reports, when you're going after these types of sites, you don't want that on those pages. That's just going to ruin your ROI on this. So really just focus solely on, how do I create the most robust guide on this specific topic and make it super relevant to either the broad consumer base or to students, right? So I did an analysis of over 200 links that we've earned in the past year from .edu sites, kind of just trying to understand, what are the different themes on these .edu blogs that they're willing to cover. So obviously anything that's related to a student, the degrees that specific college offers, real world challenges that a lot of students are going to face post-graduation, things like career advancement. So, career and employment trends, like how to ask for a raise, or, a guide to careers in accounting, or a guide to careers in any number, hundreds of jobs. Technology and future trends. So things like healthcare, tech and healthcare, bias problems in AI with DALL-E, financial literacy, health and wellness, cultural, educational, economic, all the trends that relate to students. And you guys are going to get this deck, so I don't want to spend too much more time on that part. So monitoring the news is going to breeze through this too. So glad it's useful for everybody. Sorry, I'm going to take a little bit more time. I always end up doing this. My goal is to provide the most value I can, and there's a lot changing in the industry right now and a lot of opportunity. So it's really good stuff to talk about. So how do you monitor breaking news, right? How do you find these opportunities for free or low cost? X to me is one of the best ways to do that, right? There are a lot of different hashtags that journalists use to actively reach out to, PR people, brands, to say, okay, I'm looking for this topic. These hashtags have been around since the start of the industry. And so there are some that are more popular than others. I did an analysis in Q4 looking at which hashtags get the most traction, which days of the week are they most active. So key message here is Monday through Friday, it's pretty much all kind of at the same level of people that are posting, somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 or more tweets per day on, hashtag journal request, hashtag PR request. Those are the two that I would use primarily when doing my searches, because as you can see, those are 11 to close to 20,000 hashtags per day, versus the other ones like blogger request, journal request are kind of in the hundreds. So, go after the biggest ones, the most common ones. Also, what exactly are they looking for, right? They're looking for experts to comment. They're generally looking for data. If you have any relevant data, it doesn't need to be breaking data. It could just be data that you have from an older study, even if it's relevant to what they're looking for. Personal stories or case studies. You can see here from the sample of tweets that I literally just screenshotted last night for this deck. They're all posted within the last few hours. There's so many of these opportunities. So you can just search journal requests. Sometimes you can add your vertical, you can add studies or topics that are relevant to the studies that you produced, and find great opportunities for your brand. Better than that, you can create custom X lists of journalists that are relevant to your specific brand. So I've got lists for, education writers, finance writers, healthcare writers. You should have dozens of those. And as part of Lead Time, I'm sure I'll make those public in the next few months. Pretty much every vertical needs expert quotes. Some have more opportunities than others, especially health, I think, with the changes to EAT, right? People are looking for that firsthand expertise in their stories. So if you work in any of those verticals, it's a great opportunity to get quotes. Glimpse. So this is an extension of Google Trends. It's a really great add-on, very inexpensive. And what it helps you do is kind of add additional data and track keywords that are just starting to break in the news. So something like, I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten a ton of leads from AI photo generators, so especially headshot generators, which I use myself, and it was pretty cool. So I have set up keywords looking at like AI generators, AI pic generators, and each one of them have seen close to 900% growth in search in the last year. So like these are all great stats to just kind of be monitoring behind the scenes for your brand. And it can help you really drill into and identify the ones that might be coming up. And you can set alerts for when it reaches a certain threshold to say, okay, now it's time to go. Generally you're looking for some growth that's over about 100 to 300%, preferably even more than that, because the bigger it gets, the more headlines you're going to get. BuzzSumo has really great tools for creating kind of custom news feeds that are relevant to your specific vertical. Reddit is huge, right? There's been so much change in the SERPs recently featuring Reddit too, but really just going in and kind of bookmarking all of the subreddits that are relevant to your vertical is a great way to see kind of what's about to be trending in your vertical. So many journalists look to Reddit as a data source too. So typically if you see something that starts to take off there, it's a great way to be like, okay, let's get some quotes on this topic because it's starting to trend on our teachers or our technology. Newsletters are great, especially newsletters that are very niche to your vertical, and even better than that, that specifically have breaking news recaps. So like CBS News, a lot of the mainstream news publishers have specific breaking news alerts, and those are a gold mine to go after. Like I said before, the seasonal event calendars, whether you use one internally, so we have Asana and we kind of just add to there, or there's dozens of other ones that I've linked here that other brands have put up. Basically, you just look into event calendars on Google and you'll find, or PR event calendars, you can find dozens of these, but they help you monitor kind of what's coming up that you can tap into. Also, there are so many great PR newsletters now that kind of distill what's working for everybody else. How can you replicate it? So one of my favorites is the Grapevine. I also saw another person share the PR Insider. Really great opportunities for finding PR. Okay, so last section. I hope you guys maybe have 5-10 minutes to stay over if we can. So PR, right? How do you scale all this great stuff now? You've produced really newsworthy content, and now you want to get it out there to the media, which is the hardest step, in my opinion, because publishers are just inundated with these pitches now. So I have maybe 3 or 4 slides on Lead Time, which is the AI-powered PR workflow that we've invested as a bootstrapped agency over the last 3 years to build. We're getting ready to release it in Q3. So follow along, because this is freaking incredible and also terrifying. What this tool does is you basically put in a landing page, any type of content, blog page, whatnot, a study, and you set a certain date range for publishers that you want to find that have written stories. And what it does is it uses semantic search to find out what journalists have author archives that are similar to the content that you're covering, both in the topical themes and the intent in the author archives. And what it does is immediately, within like 3 seconds, generates hundreds of relevant journalists that are very highly accurate to what you're pitching. So, journalists will frequently say what the most frustrating thing is about PR people is they flood their inboxes with like press releases or like boring content or the same stuff, and it's not relevant to them. What this does is it ensures relevance because it's using AI to kind of scale that outreach and look at thousands of author archives to find what is most similar to you. The tool, what it also does, it allows you to analyze kind of trending news as it's happening. And really, so I can ask it a question like, I have a study on summer sexual trends between the US and the UK. It's always fun to have health clients. And so what I did is I asked it, what are the trends in the UK versus the US on sexual health and wellness? And it quickly in seconds spat out a whole list of angles that I could now create 10 different pitch angles for my study as like a lead, right? The start of a story, the most interesting news hook in your story, a lead. So Lead Time, what it does is helps you analyze what are those angles that you can create in your pitch templates to scale your outreach. Because if you can identify relevant stories that are trending, that are different than yours, not identical, but similar, right, that you can build on, now suddenly you go from having 100 pitches to 10 different angles, 1,000 pitches, 500 pitches. You want to stay really relevant. So it's never a volume game, it's a relevance game when it comes to pitching. Another thing it can do is you can ask specific questions about very specific journalists. So you can identify someone in step 1 and say, okay, I want to give an exclusive to the person that has the best syndication. I think it's Kathy Donahue. Is it likely that if I offer her the exclusive, she will pick this study based on my landing page and what her author archives have versus what I'm sharing? And it will distill for you what the gaps are in her coverage, the tone of her writing style, the type of data she likes to feature, what you have that she hasn't covered that she would be interested in. It's incredible. It can also help you find similar journalists. So you can kind of say, okay, I like this one journalist over here. Show me ones that have similar author archives to this. You can spit out hundreds of other ones. So the point here is that whether it's Lead Time, whether it's Cision, Muckrat, Prowly, right? There's BuzzSumo, all of these tools are moving at lightning speed to integrate AI to help scale outreach. And what Fractl has done is used its 12 years as an industry leader in doing this work and all of the templates and the variations that we've come up with that really drive effective coverage. And it helps you kind of use our approach with your content to develop pitches. And what it really does is it scrapes LinkedIn and Twitter profiles, X profiles, I'll never get there, And it kind of distills down all this really great info about the person as an individual, which is, to me, the most important thing in PR, is connecting as a human with another journalist, which is kind of funny because now AI can help you do it at scale in a way that you couldn't previously do. And so it kind of distills all this information, and then it helps weave it into the pitch. So as you're list building, you're adding all these people and all this information through the Q&A that you do, it will generate a pitch based on the stories it found that are most relevant to what you're pitching. It'll kind of create the angles that go beyond what that person covered and kind of show how your study builds on that. Just last week, what I did was put a landing page in, added a couple contacts, and it drafted the whole pitch, sent it, and it was Reuters. So like, there's so much potential for this. And I don't want the PR industry to be terrified of it, right? Because what it does is it enables you to now go out and actually build relationships, right? Like, spend more time on X or the other platforms where you can really get to know the journalists, spend more time asking them, like, what is it that you really love to cover? Or, build the relationship, like do the part of the work that's the most fun. List building has always been the most tedious for us and for publishers. So now use these tools to help scale that in a way that you can scale personalization like never before. And the people that are resistant to it, I fear, will be left behind, right? I think there's a certain adoption curve. And if you've ever taken a marketing course, we're definitely in the innovator stage. But you want to be there in an early adopter before you get left behind on these tools, because the agencies and the companies that like these tools are going to just have, far exceeded the ROI of traditional approaches. And I think that's the biggest danger of people that may look at this and think, oh, it can't replicate a human. It's on an exponential curve of innovation. It's going to replicate a human. It already is. So here's another example. Go banking rates pitch, right? Found some relevant data that the person had wrote about, kind of distilled down what the stats are from our pitch that were the most newsworthy or surprising using all the research that we've done. Followed up immediately, asked for additional interview, got coverage within a week. Okay, so that's lead time. There's lots of ways for you to replicate this type of research using Claude, using GPT. Many of those tools have a $10, $20 a month option on them, because I know a lot of these PR tools can go for like 15, 20 grand a year. We're definitely going to undercut that significantly. But in the meantime, right, in the next month or two, you can use GPT to do a lot of this research, right? So one of the best prompts that I'll use is, which journalist beats are most relevant to the campaign I'm pitching? I'll include the URL. If it has trouble scraping that URL because you're using blockers, just copy paste the whole entire content into the platform and it'll analyze it for you. And what this does is it quickly analyzes all the relevant beats and all the relevant journalists that you could cover with your campaign, because the more angles you can identify, the more pitches you can get out, the more unique linking domains you can build. So I did this for my sexual health and wellness study. Obviously, health and wellness, lifestyle, dating, sex and sexuality, women's issues, men's health, culture, trends, psychology, technology, travel, right? Because we had a stat about, I think 20% of people travel for a romantic fling. So this is great, right? In seconds, it can tell me 10, 12 different angles I could go after. The next one is, what are the emerging trends? So in the same way that I did it in lead time, I can do it within GPT. I can be very specific. The longer you build these prompts, the more in-depth research you'll get. But my goal in this webinar is to show you how approachable it is, right? Because I think so many people look at technology and they think, oh God, that's terrifying. It's going to replace me. It's this army. It only replaces you if you don't know how to use it, right? So learn how to use it to be more effective and you'll skyrocket your results. So instead of spending, countless hours researching what's trending, you can just ask GPT, what's trending on X, Y, and Z topic or an X vertical, and it's going to spit out, relevant sources to the studies that are trending on your topic that could be relevant to you to do a study on, expand on, or to pitch. After I know the beats that I want to go after, the trending news that I could tie into my pitches, then I'm going to ask for a very specific journalist, right? So come up with a list of 20, 30, 50 high authority publishers that might be interested in covering my campaign. Please include, you have to be very specific, include a link to the author archives. Also include their email addresses if you can find them. Oftentimes it found the format, right? There's lots of tools like Rocket Reach, Hunter.io that you can use for email verification for low cost. But generally they all follow a similar format of like first period, last name at publisher, or first initial, last name at publisher. You can kind of BC some of them if you want to be not paying for a lot of tools, essentially. So this is a great example of how you can use GPT, right, to help you find publishers. And you don't ever, if you get an answer that doesn't represent what you want, don't stop there and think it just doesn't know how to do it. Typically, you might need to ask the question differently or tell it to explain to you what was the process it followed to get to that data, because that can help you identify where did it go wrong. And you can really edit and work on getting the final answer you want versus just looking at the first response and saying, oh, it doesn't know what I want, right? That's a huge mistake I think a lot of people are making right now. So what I did in one of these searches is I found 2 great journalists, right? And I said, okay, well, they both write for the same publisher. I'm not going to pitch them both the same campaign, at least not in the same day, maybe a week or 2 later if the first one doesn't respond. So I want to know which one of these is better, because generally they cover similar content. So I'll dump both their author archives in, or I'll scrape, the last 3 months of titles. And then I'll say, can you evaluate the author archives and which is better fit for my study? And then it quickly distills, okay, this person's clearly better for X, Y, and Z reason. Done in seconds. This is all time saved, increased ROI for you to do other activities that are even more impactful. Brainstorm subject lines. So this was a meat of the webinar here today. So I have a lot of examples here. So GPT, Claude, they're incredible for generating subject lines. It's probably one of the best things you can use them for, because it can create them in seconds. And subject lines will make or break you in an inbox. My biggest thing is I would never use just like a basic content title. So like whatever your study was, like I wouldn't use that, because generally so many other brands are doing similar studies. So you really have to hook into what new data or expertise do you have that's different than other people. So a lot of the subject lines we use have data in them to show we have something new to provide. So I will say, help me put together 10 subject lines using this data that would be most likely to elicit surprise, because I know from my viral marketing research, surprise is what leads to the greatest viral hooks, viral sharing. And that's how I can drive a journalist to open my email over somebody else's, because they read 6 to 10 words and they're like, ooh, that looks interesting. That's surprising. That's not something I already knew. So that prompt specifically having those words in it is key here. So, it pulled up 1 to 10 adults plan to have 3+ sexual partners this summer. I'm like, that's pretty surprising. 3, that seems like a good number for some people. Americans, 33% more likely to be single than Britons. So, there's a UK versus US angle I can go after to pitch Daily Mail, Telegraph, all those sites. Lots of other stats here. So use GPT to brainstorm subject lines for specific writers. So this is even better. When you can mimic the writer's headline style with your subject line, they can immediately see the potential for their story to come to life, right? And they know that you've done a lot of research on their archives to be mimicking them. So they respect that. So outdoor encounters, the summer sex trends you didn't see coming. Morning glory, why 40% of Brits prefer early romances. So these mimicked a specific writer that I gave them, it's a person now, all of her headlines, and then it mimicked that with my specific research. You can also do regional. So regional is a great way to scale your brand coverage. If you have data that is either US versus UK, or one country versus another, or one town versus another. We do a lot of, in the US, state-based campaigns. So we'll have data on, Los Angeles versus Miami versus New York City. And each one of those metros has, dozens of authoritative publishers. Generally, there's syndicates at like CNBC, ABC, Fox. They all have regional publishers as well as their national ones. So anytime you can have regional data in your subject lines, it's key, especially when you're pitching those regional publishers. So that's a great way to scale it. You can also come up with stats for men versus women, because there's tons of men's and women's lifestyle publishers. And to me, they're some of the easiest ones to break into because they like more fluffy content, right? More rigorous publishers like health and psychology are a bit harder. They have to adhere to those EAT guidelines, right? So quickly kind of distills for me male versus female stats. This would have previously taken me hours to go through all these different types of angles. And what I can do now is just look at 10 at a time, pick my best ones, tell it to pick the best ones. It's your own personal PR assistant that is very sophisticated. Generational differences do really well on a lot of publishers. So, for the longest time, it was everybody riding on millennials, and now it's Gen Z stats are really starting to become mainstream. Boomers will always be huge because there's so many of them. So figuring out how to distill your data into generational hooks and going after writers that specifically cover generational hooks. There's thousands of them. And in closing, thank you for bearing with me over these last 9 minutes over. When you have expertise that typically when you go to pitch a campaign, they want some sort of interview, maybe you're strapped on time or you don't feel that confident, or you're having a hard day and you just want some inspiration. GPT and Claude are incredible for coming up with great quotes that you as the expert can then edit and paraphrase into your own words or add additional data to make it more custom and unique. The key here is, yes, journalists don't want like regurgitated AI crap. So you need to refine your prompt to make sure it's giving you authoritative sources, unique information, right? So I'm saying share unique tips. They aren't widely known. Find authoritative sources to reference and link those sources for me. Preferably don't include competitors, right? So maybe link nonprofits or industry associations or .gov sites, non-commercial entities. And then quickly, I'm suddenly an expert in expat taxes, right? And I've got a lot of authoritative sources. I can then draft this quote for my client, send it over to them to approve. 9 out of 10 times they approve with minimal to no edits. And then we get coverage on major sites. So the point here today is I could spend hours. Clearly, I had to run through this 1 hour myself on any of these topics. You just have to play around with these tools more, learn how to use them, continue to edit your prompts, ask additional questions when it's not giving you the output you want. And there's just so much potential, and there's going to be so many new tools hitting the market every week right now. So staying in tune with what's out there is going to really help you stand out as a brand in a lower cost way than you ever could have done before. So go ahead. I was looking at the questions now, other ones I might have missed. AI definitely makes mistakes. It's important you're asking it for sources of truth. So on the example I shared at the end, referencing .gov or associations, really authoritative sources, is a great way to help ensure that it's sharing factual information. You definitely want to be fact checking along the way. And weaving your prompts in to say, make sure you're pulling from the data that I have here, or giving it a spreadsheet of your data, even better. Go ahead, Alina. I don't know if you had other questions that you already spotted.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, wow. I just can agree with Helen. I didn't expect it would be packed with so many practical tips, examples, ideas, actionable things. I bookmarked several things, and I'll definitely rewatch the recording just to make sure if I haven't missed anything. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I can see that you covered all the questions. Shall we devote several minutes for questions? Maybe our viewers have other questions. And meanwhile, there are a couple of questions I would like to ask. What are some pitfalls to avoid when integrating AI into digital PR strategy?
Yeah, I think the biggest pitfall is expecting the first answer to be exactly what you wanted. Really taking the time to work with it as if it is your PR assistant and say, give it feedback. If it gave you certain data and you thought maybe, I've definitely seen this before, right? Where I gave it all the tweets for the journalist analysis that I did on the hashtags that were used. And one of the stats just seemed like really off. And so, I'll say, please go back through the data analysis and look for outliers and remove them, right? And that can be a major thing that sometimes like you as a person, when looking at the raw data in front of you, would do, but you forget when you're working with an AI that those things can be in there that you want to edit out, right? My business partner, Kristen Tinsky, is at the bleeding edge of AI. She gained access to GPT years before it was released to the public because she had started a nonprofit in 2020. And so that got her foot in the door. And so she is a wizard and has put a lot alongside her brother, Dan Tinsky, into building these technologies. And one of the tips that she said to me was that when you're working with it, especially on data analysis, one of the things you can do, and this should be a whole separate webinar, is like using AI to create content, because that's, you know, a huge topic too, is you tell it to have one agent act like the creative strategist, and you're a top-down, bottom-up, lateral thinker, and you know, all the traits you would want in a creative strategist or data journalist. You can look up these job descriptions and give it that information. And then say your second agent is a scrupulous editor and cares greatly about fact checking and source accuracy and wants everything sourced line by line and needs a clear explanation of your process. And then what happens is they work as two agents together under one umbrella to create really interesting content, but also fact check it along the way, right? And that's where agents really become way more powerful than just a single question. It's when you can have two AIs working together to create research and edit it down for you. So really, it comes down to your prompting and making sure that you're giving it a prompt to know what to look out for, what to check for, and the data accuracy is one of the biggest things. So kind of weaving those two things into that prompt is really key to ensuring your study accuracy. And also asking about the process, because then you can spot mistakes.
Yeah, thank you. Makes sense. And my second question about some predictions, maybe. What future developments in AI should PR specialists be preparing for now? Or maybe how developing of AI can impact PR processes?
I think the people that are really embracing AI technologies, even the most simplest ones, like get a Claude membership, get a GPT membership. Sometimes Claude can do things GPT can't. So it's worth having, you know, a combined $20, $40 a month budget for some of those tools, because of the fact that they can scale so much of your job and make you so much more efficient. And I think right now, if I were an employee, I would be sinking my teeth into all of the tools that are out there and all the ways that I can use them to do the most mundane parts of my job, the most tedious parts that take me the most time, that aren't the most enjoyable, that it can be more difficult, like data analysis, list building, figure out how to use those tools to be more efficient. Because a year from now, the people that have adopted this technology will be the people, that get the 10, 20 grand raises, that still have a job, right? That aren't fired. Because you can see in our industry, especially in SEO and marketing, AI will replace a lot of jobs for people that don't adopt it. It'll replace a lot of mundane tasks. But if you can stay ahead of the curve and use it to be more efficient, to be more innovative. So don't be afraid of it. Embrace it, really.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So it looks we've addressed all the questions. As we near the end of our session, I want to turn to you, Kelsey. Is there anything you'd like to add or emphasize before we wrap up?
I think what I would emphasize is there's a ton of strategies, right? I have a huge team behind me that pursues each one of these strategies. If I were a small business, an independent, sole proprietor, right? What I would do is start with the strategies that have low to no cost, right? So expert quotes are one of the best ones to go after. Monitoring those journalist hashtags for journalists that might be looking for your expertise in your specific vertical, and do that on like a daily basis. It takes 5 to 10 minutes. There's lots of tools that can automate it for you in this deck. And really starting your day there, I think, is one of the best ways to get that coverage. Quoted is one of the highest ROI platforms for that type of opportunity, in my opinion. So that's a great tool if you're going to get one, to start there. And then from there, research doesn't need to be extremely costly. You can do smaller surveys. Oftentimes what I see is that teams sometimes struggle with really honing in on what the most newsworthy question would be, like what is going to produce the most newsworthy, surprising stat for you. And if you approach it from that lens, really filter down to what are the most 5 interesting questions that allow me to tap into different demographic data, that allow me to tap into, regional angles or generational angles. And just a few questions on any number of survey platforms can generate major headlines for less than $100. And the ROI from those headlines is massive, both both in the SEO value, the brand engagement, brand awareness, and just the signals that you need for your site and your brand really to be relevant in today's marketplace, I think. So don't always think of it as, oh God, this is so expensive, I can't ever possibly do it. There's so many strategies in this deck that you can just start with one, right? So start with the quotes, start with small surveys, and go from there, grow from there.
Yeah, I like it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Guys, be sure to connect with Kelsey on LinkedIn. The link is in the live chat, and follow SendPulse on social media to stay connected. And once again, a big thank you to all of you for joining us today, for your participation. It means a lot to us. Stay tuned to our social media for updates on future webinars and events. We'd love to have you join us again. Here is a question. Shall we answer? I want to hear your opinion on content creation with AI and SEO. Does it work? Have you had success with clients?
Yeah, so this is definitely a hot topic in our industry right now. It's very interesting to me. In the last 2 to 3 months, I actually just took over our sales workflow for the first time in our business, and I'm loving it. It's, I'm able to use my PR skills and my industry experience in a very different way. And I'm also on the front lines of hearing these type of questions from people that are willing to invest in our strategies, but maybe have hesitations around the AI capabilities that are out there now. So what I would say is there are a lot of tools that are going to regurgitate really low quality, thin content. And I would not use a lot of them because they will not add value to the SERPs and you will get nailed. I saw some sites in my audits through the sales process of competitors where domains very clearly added, 1,000 pages in a month, and their traffic was like 20 to 50K, and then it zeroed out within like a month or two later. It was really tragic. And you can easily identify those pages that they created and how they were thin. So I would caution against spending a lot of money on tools that say they do that. And if you do use them, I would make sure that you're adding, those EAT principles of firsthand experience, personal stories, expertise, data to supplement that original output. That way, it stands out as maybe more than just AI produced. So I wish I would have included the slide. I have it in my Meet Fractl deck, but I saw Danny Sullivan speak in Q4 at Brighton SEO in San Diego. And he's one of the head Google search liaisons between the industry and the algorithm. And what he said is that, I wish I had the quote right here to say it, but essentially, Google is not going to penalize AI content. What they're going to penalize is crappy AI content, in the same way that they're going to penalize crappy freelance writer content, right? Like, you need to create the most robust, authoritative, detailed guides or research on something, and that's going to be rewarded. Whether or not it was created by AI or a human, they don't care at the end of the day. What they are there to do is rank really quality content. So always approach it from that lens. And, anybody can easily spot when an AI article is generated and it's like 2 sentences and then 1 bullet and then like 1 headline, 2 sentences. It's really thin, right? It's really not talking in first person. There's a lot of other signals, whole nother webinar. What I would say is, so Kristen, one of my co-founders, has been working over the last few years to create a agentic AI pipeline. So essentially, it's multiple agents stacked on top of each other to produce research that is very robust. And the way it goes about it is, essentially being able to ask 20 to 50 questions on any given topic, scraping all of that top ranking content for that vertical. Its goal is to learn the most it can about any given topic that it wants to write about. So it'll scrape anywhere from like 150,000 words. It'll distill it down into like a 10,000 word outline. And then from that, it'll further distill down and then build back up a really custom article. And what that does is it allows you to tap into, all of everything that's existing online. And then what we do is our editors will then go in and add first-person experience, case studies, research, and that type of methodology, I think, is going to be the future of content creation. It's already happening. Like, we already have several clients who are using it. just started piloting with their clients in May. So I'll have case studies probably by the end of the quarter on this. I would say 50% of people are super eager to see the cost savings and the ROI of it, especially with tools that can go beyond just like content regurgitation. And 50% of people are like, I'm going to let somebody else do that case study before I'm going to touch it. Now, keep in mind, those people are going to have a head start. I think it depends on the size of your site, your publishing cadence. I generally would say I wouldn't publish more than, for the average site, maybe 10, 20 AI pages in a month. Look at what your regular publishing cadence is and determine it from there. But, stay within a realistic publishing cadence, produce content that is really robust, 1,000, 2,000 words, not really thin. Look to add the expertise, add the data. And I think this content's going to be the future of a lot of what agencies like ours and domains are doing and brands are doing by the end of this year.
Yeah. Thank you for such a comprehensive answer and point of view from different angles. Thank you, guys. If you have any other questions related to the topic, related to the PR, just feel free to reach out to Kelsey via LinkedIn, via the email here on the slide. If you have any questions about SendPulse, our events, feel free to send messages via our social media or our website and live chat there. Thank you once again, and we are going to finish the session, but we'd love to have you join us again. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you very much for your insight. Thank you, guys, for being here. And I wish you all a wonderful week ahead. Goodbye and take care.
Bye, everyone.